I still remember the smell of roasted turkey filling our house that Thanksgiving evening. I remember my mother's cold eyes across the dinner table, and my father's voice cutting through the warm glow of candlelight like a knife through butter. You're 23 years old, and you've accomplished nothing. Absolutely nothing. Those words hung in the air as my younger brother smirked beside them, and my sister looked down at her plate in silence. Within an hour, my suitcase was on the front lawn, the door was locked behind me, and I was standing in the November cold with nowhere to go. My parents had decided I was a failure, a disappointment, a waste of their time and money. They told me to figure out life on my own, to live in the streets if I had to. That night changed everything. But what they didn't know was that their cruelty would become the fuel for something they never saw coming. Before we dive deeper into this story, I want to invite you to join our community here at Revenge Unleashed. If you love stories about justice, comebacks, and people who refuse to stay down when life knocks them over, hit that subscribe button right now. Give this video a like if you're already hooked, and drop a comment below telling me about a time someone underestimated you. Your stories fuel this channel, and I read every single comment. Now, let's get back to that cold Thanksgiving night that would change my life forever. My name is Marcus, and I grew up in a middle-class family in suburban Ohio. My father owned a small accounting firm, and my mother worked as a real estate agent. From the outside, we looked perfect. Two-story house with a white picket fence, family vacations to Florida, Christmas cards with everyone smiling in matching sweaters. But inside those walls, love always came with conditions. You had to earn it. You had to prove you were worthy of it. My younger brother, Derek, was the golden child. Star quarterback in high school, full scholarship to Ohio State, engaged to his high school sweetheart by 22. Everything he touched turned to gold, and my parents never let me forget it. My sister, Amy, played it safe. She became a nurse, got married young, gave them grandchildren. She knew how to stay in their good graces. Then there was me. I graduated college with a degree in graphic design, but the job market was brutal. I freelanced, picked up gigs here and there, worked at a coffee shop to pay bills. I was trying, really trying, but in my parents' eyes, I was just drifting. They saw my life as a series of failures rather than a journey of figuring things out. Every family dinner became an interrogation. Every phone call ended with disappointment in their voices. That Thanksgiving, everything came to a head. My brother had just gotten promoted at his finance job. Amy announced she was pregnant with her third child. And me. I had just lost a client and was behind on my rent. When my father asked what I'd been up to, I made the mistake of being honest. I told them I was struggling but working on building my own design business. I told them it was hard but I believed in what I was doing. My father laughed. Actually laughed. At some point, Marcus, you need to accept that you don't have what it takes. You're 23, living paycheck to paycheck, chasing some fantasy about being an artist. Meanwhile, your brother is buying a house, and your sister is raising a beautiful family. What are you contributing? What have you ever contributed to this family besides disappointment? My mother nodded along, her face tight with what looked like disgust. We've supported you long enough. We paid for your college, we let you live here after graduation, we've given you chance after chance. But you just keep failing. Maybe it's time you learned what the real world is like without us catching you every time you fall. I tried to defend myself, tried to explain that success doesn't happen overnight, that I was building something meaningful even if they couldn't see it yet. But Derek jumped in, saying I was making excuses like I always did. Amy stayed silent, like she always did when things got ugly. The argument escalated until my father stood up, pointed toward the door, and said the words that would echo in my mind for years. Get out. Pack your things and get out of my house. If you think you're so capable of making it on your own, prove it. Go live in the streets for all I care. You're not welcome here until you become someone worth being proud of. I thought he was bluffing. I thought my mother would intervene. But she just sat there, stone-faced, and when I looked at her for support, she simply said, maybe this is what you need, Marcus. Maybe hitting rock bottom will finally wake you up. Within an hour, I was outside with one suitcase, my laptop bag, and about $300 to my name. They didn't answer when I knocked. They didn't answer when I called. I spent that night in my car, parked outside a 24-hour diner, crying until I had no tears left. I felt humiliated, abandoned, and utterly broken. But somewhere in that darkness, something else started to grow. Anger. Determination. A burning desire to prove them wrong, not just by succeeding, but by making them regret every cruel word they'd said. I couch-surfed with friends for a few weeks, picking up every design gig I could find. I worked 18-hour days, fueled by rage and coffee. I reached out to every contact I'd ever made, pitched my services to small businesses, offered discounted rates just to build my portfolio. I lived on ramen and determination. 3 months after that Thanksgiving, I landed my first major client, a startup that needed complete branding. They loved my work and referred me to others. 6 months later, I had enough clients to rent a small apartment. A year later, I hired my first employee. My little freelance hustle was becoming a real agency. But success wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel what I'd felt. I wanted them to understand the weight of their cruelty. So I planned something they would never forget. I spent 2 years building my business into something impressive. I rebranded from a freelance operation to a full-service creative agency. We landed major clients, won industry awards, got featured in design magazines. I made sure every achievement was documented, every success was public. But I never reached out to my family. I didn't call, didn't visit, didn't send updates. As far as they knew, I could have been homeless, struggling, or worse. And I let them wonder. Meanwhile, I hired a private investigator to keep tabs on them. I learned that my father's accounting firm was struggling. Several clients had left, and he was facing increasing competition from larger firms. My mother's real estate business had slowed down in a tough market. Derek's perfect life wasn't so perfect anymore either. His engagement fell apart, and he'd been demoted at work after a costly mistake. Only Amy seemed stable, but I knew from the investigator's reports that she felt guilty about that Thanksgiving and had tried to reach out to me multiple times, only to be shut down by her parents. On the third Thanksgiving after they kicked me out, I made my move. I bought a full-page ad in our local newspaper, the one my father read every morning with his coffee. The ad featured a photo of me at our agency's office, surrounded by my team, with a headline that read, "From the streets to success, local designer builds award-winning agency after family rejection." The article told my story. How I'd been thrown out by my parents for not meeting their expectations. How I'd built a business from nothing, working from coffee shops and sleeping in my car at first. How my agency now employed 15 people and worked with national brands. I named my parents. I quoted the things they'd said to me that night. I made sure everyone in our community knew exactly what they'd done and exactly how wrong they'd been about me. But I wasn't finished. I also sent personalized letters to each of my father's remaining clients, offering them superior services at competitive rates, making it clear that while we shared a last name, I represented everything he wasn't: innovative, compassionate, and actually good at what I did. Within 3 months, 5 of his 8 remaining clients switched to my agency or used my contacts to find other firms. His business collapsed shortly after. For my mother, I bought every property she had listed. I had the money by then, and I used anonymous LLCs to purchase them at asking price, which thrilled her at first. But then I had those properties relist with competing agents, cutting her out of future commissions and making it clear to other sellers in the area that her listings weren't secure. Her reputation took a hit she couldn't recover from. I made sure Derek knew about my success too. I hired one of his ex-colleagues and gave them the position Derek had always wanted. When Derek eventually applied to work at my agency, desperate after his career stalled, I personally conducted the interview. I asked him if he remembered that Thanksgiving dinner. I asked him if he remembered smirking while our father humiliated me. Then I told him we wouldn't be moving forward with his application. The calls started coming after the newspaper ad. First from Amy, apologizing, saying she'd always felt terrible about what happened. I forgave her because she'd been the only one who hadn't actively participated in my destruction. Then from my parents, furious at first, demanding I retract the ad, calling me vindictive and cruel. I didn't answer. I let them leave voicemails that grew increasingly desperate as their businesses crumbled and their reputation in the community shifted from upstanding citizens to the heartless parents who threw their son out on the street. Finally, my father showed up at my office. He looked older, smaller somehow. He asked to speak with me privately, and against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat in my office, him on one side of my large desk, me on the other. The power dynamic had completely reversed. He tried to apologize, but it came out wrong. He said he'd been trying to motivate me, that he never thought I'd actually end up on the streets, that he always believed I'd figure it out. He said he was proud of what I'd built, even if his own business was suffering because of it. He asked if we could find a way forward as a family. I looked at this man who had raised me, who had once taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework, who had also looked me in the eye and told me I was worthless. I felt the anger I'd carried for 3 years, the fuel that had driven every late night and early morning. And I realized something important. The revenge had felt good in the moment, watching their world crumble the way mine had. But it hadn't healed the wound. It had just created new ones. I told my father the truth. That what he did to me was unforgivable, not because he pushed me out, but because he made me believe I was worthless when I needed support most. That his apology meant nothing if he couldn't acknowledge the real damage he'd caused. That I hadn't destroyed his business to hurt him, I'd simply become better at what he did, and that wasn't revenge, it was just consequence. I told him I'd be willing to rebuild some kind of relationship, but it would be on my terms. He would have to accept that I didn't need his approval anymore, that I never needed it in the first place. He would have to acknowledge what he did in front of the whole family and mean it. And he would have to understand that the son he threw away that Thanksgiving night was gone. The man sitting across from him now was someone who'd learned to save himself. It took time, but slowly, carefully, we found a fragile new normal. My father closed his firm and actually came to work for me, handling our agency's finances. It was humbling for him, but he did it. My mother eventually apologized too, really apologized, and we rebuilt something that resembled a relationship, though it would never be what it was. Derek and I remained distant. Some bridges, once burned, leave nothing but ash. The lesson I learned through all of this wasn't about revenge, though that's how it started. It was about understanding that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally will fail you in the worst ways. And when that happens, you have a choice. You can let it destroy you, or you can let it forge you into something stronger. My parents thought throwing me out would teach me a lesson about failure. Instead, it taught me that their definition of success was meaningless, and that the only approval I needed was my own. Sometimes revenge isn't about tearing someone else down. Sometimes it's about building yourself up so high that their cruelty becomes just a distant memory from when you were someone else entirely. Sometimes the best revenge is becoming everything they said you couldn't be and then deciding whether they even deserve to witness it. That Thanksgiving changed my life, but not in the way my parents intended. It didn't break me. It woke me up to who I really was and what I was truly capable of when I stopped seeking validation from people who were never going to give it. And that realization was worth more than any apology they could ever offer.